Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Elevate Your Soul podcast. Today, I'm going to be interviewing Robin Kerr, a video journalist who explores relationships, sexuality, and gender. He is in a polyamorous relationship himself, and today we will be discussing polyamory, the biggest challenges in polyamorous relationships, common misconceptions about polyamory, how to transition from being in a monogamous relationship to an open or a poly relationship, and so much more. I hope you guys enjoy this episode. Hello, Robin. Welcome to the Elevate Your Soul podcast.
Hey, great to be here.
Thank you so much for coming on. First question of the day. What elevates your soul?
What elevates my soul? Well, I feel like I'm going to give a very on-brand answer for the topic we're going to be looking at today. For me, honestly, what elevates my soul is relationships, connecting with people. I'm polyamorous. I have been polyamorous for 2 years. I'm also like a journalist, so I'm quite interested in the world of relationships, dating, sexuality, gender. But I honestly just going on dates, connecting with people, having relationships, that's really what elevates my soul. Honestly, it's the stuff of life, and I feel like you see so much about yourself. You learn so much about yourself through how you relate to other people.
All right, perfect. Second question, what is polyamory?
Great question. So polyamory quite literally means many loves. And I think it's important that we define polyamory in relation to monogamy, which is sort of the, let's say, the default way that we have relationships in the Western world. And monogamy, if you quite literally break it down, is a single marriage. And so it's interesting to think because monogamy is not how we have always lived. Monogamy was, it's hard to define, but people sort of say about 20,000 years ago when we moved from being a sort of hunter-gatherer culture to farming on land, we radically changed the way we live. And so from being able to have multiple relationships in a tribe or over our lifetime, we got really obsessed with heritage because we had these farms that we wanted to pass down in our family. And so
or we got really obsessed with what's mine and what's yours and owning property.
Absolutely, and owning property. And that was quite a, that's in terms of human development, that's a really recent construct. Yeah. And so when that happened, not only did this idea of hereditary ownership come into play, but also this idea that women in particular were the property of a man, their husband, or their family. Yes. And I think when we think about dating and relationships now, I think it's actually really important to engage with that, because I think as someone who's a feminist, or if you consider yourself an ally, if you're just sort of wandering into monogamy unquestioned, it actually has quite an oppressive root behind it. You know, its history is actually based on a power structure that on some level was designed to oppress women or regard them as property. Yes. And so polyamory is something that outside of the West, there are cultures that still practice that to this day. It's also something that you would find more common in queer communities, gay communities. It's not necessarily the norm to have this sort of idea of like, oh, you're seeing someone exclusively. And I think for some reason in the last sort of maybe 10, 20 years, it's really started to enter the popular consciousness of people on the dating scene. Now, that could be for a number of reasons. That could just be the internet and people discussing ideas around this. This could be that suddenly with dating apps like Tinder. It's suddenly we're not in this like scarcity of being able to find other people. I mean, even in just my experience, I found that as someone who dates and defines themselves as polyamorous on, say, dating apps, even a year ago, I would get people saying, "Whoa, what's polyamory? I've never heard of that before."
Yeah.
And even in, say, the last year, that's not a question I get anymore. Somehow, people understand what that term is, and it's not for everyone, and I totally appreciate that. There are people, and I'm great. I think this is just like such a dream when people do meet that one person who can satisfy all their wants, needs, and desires.
Yep.
But this is sort of the script of how we go about relationships doesn't allow them to get what they need from one person. And I guess there's a tragedy, I guess, when either someone has to soldier on unhappy in a relationship, or
both of them silently, right?
Or both of them silently. Another word for polyamory is ethical non-monogamy. So those two phrases go by the by. You can still cheat on someone and be polyamorous. You can be unethically, you can act unethically.
Exactly.
If you're not telling your partners about what's going on, if you're not being transparent. But I guess I feel really sad for people when they end up cheating on their partner, which is increasingly common. The majority of marriages end in divorce, and so for me, I feel like if people were more willing to question the sort of standard rules that we're handed down about relationships and negotiate those with their partners and say, well, what's the right setup for us? And it might be monogamy, it might be monogamy. Fantastic. It might be monogamy for now. It might be monogamish. It might be an open relationship. But also I think it's important to say, like, yeah, maybe we want to be polyamorous. Maybe we want to be able to have sexual relationships with other people, but also it's okay to have romantic relationships with other people within polyamory. Yeah.
Yeah. A polyamorous relationship can look so different from one person to the next.
Totally. And I guess that's also part of it, I think, because monogamy, we've seen a million and five movies, romantic comedies, or stories about the prince waking up the princess and them living happily ever after. We know what that looks like, but polyamory is this bizarre catch-all in a sense, because if you start to define what a relationship is for yourself and it's not following those standard rules, you can end up creating something that's quite distinctly different from
the rest.
From the rest. Yeah,
it's so true. It's so true. Like monogamy seems to come with a rule book that we're all very aware of at an early age. That's how we're conditioned to think the only way to be in a relationship is. And then when you see something like polyamory, it's just so different. And that's why, like, for myself, how you said, even over the last year, you feel like it's getting more and more common and people are understanding what it means. I think a lot of time I still like to give some explanation, because sometimes people will just nod their head and say, oh yeah, they know what polyamory is. Or you'll say you're in a polyamorous relationship and they'll nod as if they know, but they're not really sure, but they're too intimidated or shy to ask you what that actually means.
Yeah, definitely.
Because the thing with monogamy, if you just say, oh, I'm in a relationship, with so-and-so, or if you just say I'm monogamous, it's just like, oh yeah, everyone knows what that means. But even if you understand polyamory, and like for both of us, we know what polyamory means. If you were to tell me you're in a polyamorous relationship, I still would have no idea what your relationship would be like. And you would have no idea what my polyamorous relationship would be like. Because in the web of polyamory, it's just all completely, it can be so different.
You can be in a lot of different relationships. You often, it's referred to as a polycule. So a polycule kind of can be a bunch of weird shapes. Dorothy can be sleeping with Mike. Mike is in love with Jeremy. Jeremy is married to Margaret. Margaret also has a live-in boyfriend, Steve, and together Steve, Margaret, and Mike are raising a child. So that's that's a kind of a pretty amazing shape to map out, and you might call that a polycule. And people can sort of quite as obviously happens, people will come and go from that, or someone in that polycule may start a romantic or sexual relationship with someone else, or a relationship or sexual relationship may end between two people. So that's often referred to as a polycule. So you can call yourself solo poly, without having to be in a relationship. Then there are people who are in relationships with one other person and can define themselves as polyamorous. That some of the terminology is, and people have differing opinions about whether this is good or not, but often people would describe having a primary partner, which might be someone who's like your nesting partner. You might live with them, you might have a child with them, and then you might have secondary partners who maybe it's more dating, or you see each other when you can. I've actually been, maybe I'll tell a little story. So I've actually been a secondary partner to someone, and it's actually really freeing sometimes to know that you're not having to be the be all and end all for them. You can, if they're out of town, they come and see you and have a lovely experience with you, and then they can just take off and you can go about living your life. So it's not always a bad thing to be second fiddle. But also some people do it kind of can be quite bruising.
To me, I just find like it has a lot to do with the amount of time you spend with them as well. So it's just like, it just turns out that you happen to spend more time with Tom than you do with Michael or whatever. So yeah.
One of the key tenets of polyamory is understanding that there is no scarcity of love. We don't, if we have multiple children, it doesn't mean that you love one of them and then you've got no room for love for the rest. You can love multiple people, and that actually, I think this is the hardest thing for a lot of people to understand, and I think this is quite a challenging idea for some people. But when you love someone and then you also love someone else, you can, and you're transparent about that with both people, you can bring a lot of that energy and excitement and fulfillment that you're finding in those two relationships to each other.
Yes.
You're just a happier, more fulfilled person, and you're able to bring all of that joy to all of the relationships you have.
Exactly. At the end of the day, if you love someone, you just want to support them in their happiness and whatever makes them happy,
Yeah.
Interesting. And when you said as well how the shapes or whatever, they can change. But in some cases, some polyamorous people are closed as well in their relationship, right? So from my understanding, you can have an open poly relationship or a closed poly relationship. And when it's closed, that means that, whoever's in it now, it kind of stays that way, and no one is open to adding more partners to the family tree or the web.
I was watching a fantastic online web series called Extreme Love, and Extreme Love often will show you, camera will follow a family who are in some sort of very different non sort of atypical relationship, and this was a woman in America with two husbands. Obviously they are not legally her husbands. I think she's married to one of them. We can get into the politics of that later on. But one of them is the father of her two children, but the three of them together are raising those kids. And for them, yes, that is a relationship that is closed. And they've found quite a fulfilling live-in dynamic with each other.
Oh, that's so beautiful.
Yeah, it is. For me, it's really, I think that's really beautiful. I think, another thing obviously to note is like, it's fun being a cool millennial and dating and saying, oh, you're polyamorous, but also like, yeah, there are parents out there who are raising kids in a polyamorous relationship. And every one of them that I've spoken to have just said that, childcare is a dream. You're not short of hands. And that I think that's a really interesting idea. It's not something that I have necessarily experienced by myself, but I think as it becomes more and more mainstream, I think we're going to see these families that aren't we know that we all have friends, or you may yourself have had blended families where you might have like a stepmom or a stepdad. And so there's sort of this kind of growing understanding that you can have multiple guardians, you can have multiple parents. And I think as polyamory becomes more widespread, I think we're also going to see that become much more true, I think.
But it's a lot different though as well, because like what we've had a lot of in the past is, these single mothers or single parenting. And from, the people I've met who've been grown up with a single parent, it's not seen as something that people want. It's kind of, they were pushed into that situation because they divorced a husband, or they had an abusive partner they need to get away from, or they were widowed and their partner died. That was my case. That was like my mom, her husband died. And so she was a single mom and she raised all of us. And then you also see, having those step parents and like the stepmom. And but that's still tied around monogamy, because that's, the husband and wife or whatever getting divorced and then seeing other people. And a lot of times in those family dynamics, it is a bit awkward between the caregivers, because they're not all getting along all of the time. Sometimes it's fine, but some of them still have that anger or resentment towards their ex, and the kids will feel that. And that's very different than what you were saying, as in the future, like having a polyamorous family and the kids seeing all of their guardians and their parents getting along and loving each other. And that doesn't mean that they're all having sex with each other. It just means that in a sense, they all value the relationship that they have with one another. And there's a lot of respect there. And
totally.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not going to pretend that polyamory is this amazing thing that if you do it, everyone's going to be happy. Any relationship that you're in, there are going to be challenges, there are going to be struggles, there are going to be fights and resentments. And I think, whether you're in a monogamous relationship or a polyamorous relationship, the key thing is just communication and learning to listen to your feelings and then be able to convey those in a way to your partner that's constructive, that's not destructive, that you can then be open to finding your boundaries and negotiating how you'd like things to be going forward based on where you are now, and being open to change those.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And change is hard.
Change is very hard. Change is very
hard.
hard. I mean, one thing I can't speak to because it's not my experience is how to open a relationship or transition a relationship from being monogamous. I know that some people might dip their toes into swinging or being in an open relationship, where there's people sort of understand how to do that. There's definitely apps out there where you can meet people who are sort of curious about that. But if you are in a monogamous relationship and you are looking at whether either alone or with your partner, you're thinking about transitioning to polyamory, my only advice would just be like, take it really slow. Don't rush into this, and make sure you're taking care of each other, because it can be very frightening. It can be very hard moving from the sense of ownership and love. But it's all very possible. There are also groups out there, so I'd encourage you to. I know in New Zealand there's a fantastic group called Polyamory New Zealand. You can search that up on Facebook. Yeah. And it's ostensibly it's a big agony aunt column of people being like, I'm in this situation, what should I do? And a lot of people just reaching out and giving advice, which I think is really useful. And there are also meetups. So and I think it's really empowering to meet up with a community of like-minded people wherever they are in their journey, whether they've been doing it for 20 years or whether they're just taking the first baby steps into it. But just to know that you're not alone. Just to normalize that and actually sort of be like, oh, cool, this is just a thing that's happening.
Exactly. That was one of my questions actually as well, was because since I've been polyamorous, I've had a chat with a lot of people, more so girls that are in a monogamous relationship and they're wanting to change that and like try out being open with their partner or polyamorous or whatever. And they're like, how do you, like, how do I communicate with my partner that I'm even thinking of this? Because then once once you've said it, it's out in the open. And so even if the partner's like, no, I don't want that, then you're like, oh shit. And then your other partner will just be like, is she or he still satisfied with me because she was the one or he was the one to bring up wanting to explore other people and bring other people into our relationship, so like once you've said that, it's already out in the open. And I think that's why so many people who are in a monogamous relationship will fear to open that up. And personally, I think that is the hardest way to do it. Like for me, I never dealt with that either. I was just like, and end whatever ties I had with monogamy. And then when I went in and I met my new partners now, as soon as I met them, I was like, yo, I have 2 other boyfriends. Like, do you want to join the crew or not? Like, this is how I am. For now, it's not going to change. But yeah, I think for people who are in a monogamous relationship and they're wanting to open it up, at the end of the day, all it is it's a huge challenge for the relationship. And that's either going to bring you closer together or break you further apart. So it's really, and in a sense, you can see that in a good way, that you're challenging your relationship to see how strong your relationship is. Like, are you really going to still care for each other? Are you going to learn to communicate with each other better? Are you going to be there? Or is it going to turn into this competitive thing where you're like, oh, well, you're sleeping with her, so I'm going to sleep with him. And now you have 2 partners. So I'm going to just settle for 2 partners that I'm not really interested in. And, is it going to become this competitive, jealous game? Or are you really going to learn to face your insecurities and communicate and learn to share your lover with someone else?
Totally. I mean, I think there's a couple things that I want to sort of say to that.
Yeah.
One, I think is that you can do this out of love. If your partner approaches you and says, hey, I want to open our relationship, you can think about that as a threat, or you can think about this as something that is like, in a sense, a long-term investment in your relationship.
Yep.
It may be hard to make that transition, but if you really are committed to this person and want them to be happy and to have a lifelong journey with them, then getting over that hump and opening the relationship and managing to preserve the beautiful things that you have together, then you're getting past a potential make or break moment. Another couple of things that I want to say to that is that just because you're opening up a relationship doesn't mean that it needs to be symmetrical. Someone may have needs that the other person doesn't have, and that is fine. If someone is like, but you complete me.
Yeah.
Cool. Great.
Exactly.
Awesome. Fab. I'm so happy for you.
Yeah.
But if you are feeling like whether it's you've got a lot of heart and soul and you want to share that with other people without that sort of hurting your partner, then that's okay. The same things don't need to apply. Your partner doesn't have to do those things. And so in negotiating what it is that you want to be able to do, I think it's important that you don't think that that means whatever your partner wants has to apply to you, or vice versa.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. I've been faced with that challenge myself in my relationships for sure. But as well, I feel like if the other person is like, oh, well, I feel like I'm made to be monogamous and I love monogamy while the other partner's polyamorous, it's like it can also pan out that the person who wants to be monogamous will just force themselves to be polyamorous and find another partner to cope with the other person seeing other people. So it's a chance for every person in the relationship, because when you're in a polyamorous relationship, I feel like you also learn more about yourself, and you need to establish a good relationship with yourself, And if you don't have a good relationship with yourself, it's going to be really hard to have a healthy, smooth, loving, peaceful polyamorous relationship.
Mm. I mean, another thing that often comes up, it's a question that I hear a lot, and I think I've definitely heard people who are considering opening up their relationship. They'll go, okay, well, what are the rules? What are the rules? What are the rules then? Like, how are we going to do this? And I think that word is a really dangerous word, because monogamy is based on rules.
Yes.
And as soon as you're questioning monogamy, in a sense, you're questioning rules. Another word that I would just say is boundaries. What are the boundaries? What are the boundaries that we feel we have? What would make me uncomfortable if you cross that? Boundaries can move, and you can sort of find boundaries. You might do something and then talk to your partner about maybe you had a sexy weekend and lots happened. Well, oh my God. And then they may go, hey, oh, whoa, hold up. This is actually a little upsetting to me. And wow, you've found a boundary. Now you can discuss what that is. And actually you may find that over time that boundary may disappear or it may move. They may become much more comfortable.
And what's the difference between a boundary though and an insecurity?
I think an insecurity, I mean, the question that everyone loves to ask about polyamory is, how do you deal with jealousy? How do you deal with jealousy? People are obsessed with this question.
Or they think that people who are polyamorous aren't jealous. Like a lot of people think that I'm just someone who has no insecurities and doesn't get jealous. I'm like, no.
Yeah. I mean, jealousy is something to be managed. And I think jealousy is the root cause of jealousy is insecurity. So I think if you are valuing your partner and you've set up open communication where you are letting your partner know what's going on in your life, because you want them to understand and be abreast of everything because you care about them, then hopefully you're not triggering their insecurities. But if things are left vague or they're seeing you have a great time with someone and they might feel a bit like neglected, or they might feel like, oh my God, they're finding so much joy in someone that I can't give them. Oh my God, are they going to leave me for them? Or that's when the insecurity comes out. So again, I would just say like communication is just so key. Communication is a two-way street. Learning to be vulnerable with your partner, learning to communicate openly and constructively. It's a big challenge, and it's not skills necessarily that everyone has, but it's a key part of the practice.
Yes.
I think just returning to the thing around rules, I think if you were to open up your relationship and start off with a set of rules like no more than one partner, or I need to get permission, you need to give me the chance to like veto this before I think you're setting yourself up for a lot of jealousy. You're setting yourself up for a lot of competition. I think a big part of polyamory is trust. So I would encourage people not to think about rules, but just take things slowly and negotiate what it is you want to try, and check in with each other constantly, so that you're taking care of yourself and your partner each step of the way. You're not leaving someone in the dirt to get hurt and feel insecure, feel jealous, but also at the same time, you're not trying to control in the same way that if we think about your partner as property, he's mine, he's my man, or she's my girl. Don't try and control them and their behavior. Just try and be calm and negotiate it as you go.
So I've definitely experienced that within my relationships or my relationship. And I found though, it's kind of a balance. Like I'd say rules aren't good nor bad. So for me, my partner was trying to, at one point it felt like he was trying to place rules on me, and it felt like he just completely misunderstood the concept of what I wanted. And I wanted to be polyamorous, not to be able to have sex with anyone I wanted or to go on dating apps or anything like that. I just wanted to be polyamorous to have that freedom to experience any connection that I had with someone if I were to meet them. And when certain rules were made, I felt like you're completely not understanding me and you're completely missing the point of what I'm wanting or what I'm needing right now in my life. But then after, more and more communication, then we kind of found a way that there were still some rules applied, but they were in a sense good because it was almost like a slow transition. So instead of being like, okay, let's just be polyamorous and, go crazy, it was kind of like this slow transition. And I feel like if you say no rules are good, like, I understand where that concept is coming from, but at the same time, if you truly love and respect the partner that you're with and you understand where they're at with their insecurities and say, okay, you need to find that balance between how can I still respect my partner and how can I willingly, inch them forward through this process so that they still feel safe. But at the same time, I'm not like diminishing what I want and my desires. So it's
I mean,
that middle ground.
I totally agree. So one boundary that me and my sort of primary partner have is around transparency. We've worked really hard to be transparent, not just like past, but ahead of time. Like this is my plan for the week. And it sounds quite funny, but a big thing for us was building a system around that. And so we use a Google Calendar. We have a shared Google Calendar, and we put in the dates that we're having or the time that we're spending with someone else or each other. We put that in, and so you can just see that. And for me, that is great because it means there's no sense of fear or you're very clear about how much time someone's spending with someone. And you can sort of ease yourself into the idea of like, oh, okay, they're going to go see this new guy.
Oh my God, I love that. That's such a good idea. I love it so much.
Honestly, my philosophy is that polyamory should be boring. If polyamory is boring, like if polyamory is mundane, you are doing it well. And I think that's the thing is like, it's really easy to get caught up in the sensationalism of being in something new and exciting. But I completely agree. A big part of this is, being careful of your boundaries and the boundaries of your partner or partners, and finding systems in which you can sort of take care of those needs or not trigger those insecurities. So, again, I mean, I think rules for me is there's a couple of ways you can interpret that. Yes, you may have rules of respect between a relationship, but I guess the thing I'm discouraging is like using rules as a way of trying to control the behavior of someone else. I think, as you sort of said, there's a certain amount of liberty, which polyamory is about opening yourself up to. Yeah,
exactly. And it's also just getting the other partner used. Like, it's not something that you'd want continuously for 10 years, but it's kind of like, cool, for the first year, let's set up this boundary so that I can help you feel more comfortable. But then after that year, don't place that expectation that I'm going to keep,
Yeah, and I think that's the thing is like with boundaries, you just kind of almost organically find where you stand. As long as you're communicating with each other constantly, you might go through moments where this is something that's happened to me. So I've been on both the receiving end and I've been the other person in this. So one of you might have like a really sexy weekend where you're seeing a couple of people and whoa, lots of scandal and oh my God, it was amazing. Holy hell, what a weekend. But your other partner has also just been dumped by someone and is feeling really lonely, really and vice versa. Like the same, I have been in both of those positions. And so suddenly your needs change, and you actually want more from your partner. You need a sense of security or their behavior, which when things are, say, a bit more symmetrical, might not have triggered you in a way. And I think that's, again, it's just a matter of communication and just spending time with your partner, talking about your relationship, but also the other relationships that you're in, and just getting really clear and taking care of how you're feeling. Yeah.
I agree. I agree. Communication is key. And if there's
Mm,
not too much talking going on, I'd say that's not always the best sign. You want there to be a lot of
no,
communication in polyamory,
totally,
especially in the
totally.
beginning phase when you're just getting used to it.
Yeah.
I want to ask you, what are some common misconceptions about polyamory that you've heard of when communicating with other people?
Yeah, definitely. So people often jump to, oh, it's a sex thing. It's a
Totally.
sex thing. So yeah, so I think this is sort of people again because people understand what swinging is, people understand what an open relationship is, but I think this idea it's kind of bizarre in a way, right? Like you can say like, oh, I'm a swinger, and people go like, whoa, okay, cool, wow,
Yeah.
amazing. But you can say like, oh, I'm polyamorous. I love two people.
Yeah.
People get horrified with it. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
how is that more full on? I
Or
don't
which one do you
understand.
love more?
Yeah. Which one do you love more? Like it's like yeah,
Yeah.
sounds some strange competition. So I think that yes, this idea that you can love multiple people is quite a foreign concept to people. Another one that I think people um sometimes misconstrue it as is polygamy. So
Yeah.
polygamy,
Yeah.
a man has multiple wives, like if you were there are societies in the world that have a tradition of
It's religion
polygamy.
based though as well, right?
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
often associated with religion or
Yeah.
and I guess this is a key thing. Like this is sort of me bringing my sort of feminist politic back again. I think you're really getting off on the wrong foot with someone if they think that polyamory is about the oppression of women. For me,
Right.
I do see it as questioning something that has traditionally oppressed women. But if someone is misunderstanding it as polygamy, polygamy is definitely about the oppression of women. It's the
Yeah.
ultimate example of a set of rules applying to women that don't apply to the man. He can have,
Exactly.
like the Sultan and his harem, is another
Yeah.
image of polygamy.
Yeah.
That's a misconception I think that some people have. Um, yeah, so I think those are the sort of big two that jump to mind for me. But I think people are getting more and more aware of the word and what it means as it's becoming a
Right.
bit more widespread.
Well, that's why I'm making a podcast about it, right? So to bring the awareness there.
Right.
And when and like how did you decide to become polyamorous yourself? Like when did you transition from monogamy to polyamory and why?
Great. So I used to be like a card carrying, flag waving member of the monogamy club. I
Mhm.
was big on monogamy. Like I was white picket fence fantasy and everything.
Oh,
I was all about that. And I guess there were a few steps. So one was growing up and seeing all of my friends' parents' relationships fall apart.
yeah.
Um, and then um, I guess that's sort of an experience that became increasingly common. My parents are still together, but obviously, like that's a rarity and it is a challenge. And then as I entered relationships myself, I have been cheated on.
Yeah.
I have also struggled with ethical non-monogamy myself.
Yeah.
And so I came to polyamory by meeting someone who was polyamorous. And they introduced me to the terms. They were in a primary relationship. And I found it really almost, it felt right to meet someone, to uh, be introduced to a philosophy that was in line with my behavior or my
So you
desires.
actually met someone who was
Yeah,
polyamorous
was
who
polyamorous.
oh
And then it was also kind of interesting because, again, just bringing back the question of like, well, don't you get jealous? Don't you get jealous?
yeah.
So I found as a secondary partner to this couple who were in a primary relationship, um, I I felt what's called um, oh gosh, I forgot the phrase. So the opposite of jealousy is sort of feeling truly happy for someone. And
Truly happy for
there's
someone else's happiness, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
truly happy for someone else's happiness. And I guess, there would be moments where, it's compersion. So you feel
Yes.
compersion. So when you see someone, like one example that I'll paint is, I remember my partner would be like, "Oh my God, it's my boyfriend's birthday coming up. Boys are so hard to buy for. What should I get him?"
Yeah.
And so I would give her advice, and then she'd be like, "Oh my God, that's such a great idea." And she'd go out and she'd buy it, and she'd be like, "Oh my God, I bought the thing. Look, I bought the thing." And then she would book her flights to go down and see her partner, and then send me a message being like, "Oh my God, he loved the thing, the
Aw.
present." And then and I only felt joy for them.
Right.
And it's funny because like I didn't feel people are people are obsessed with this question of like, don't you get jealous? And I mean maybe it's something in my programming, or maybe it's just that it arrived with me at the right time. But
Right.
I never felt jealous in that relationship, and that was really an eye opener for me.
Right.
We're no longer in that relationship, but I have sort of carried that forward with the relationships that I've started since then.
Beautiful. Beautiful. But
And
you felt jealousy in the past with your monogamous relationships, you said.
oh yes, I had, and I think that was. So I had a partner who tried to open our relationship up to something uh, not strictly monogamous, but they just never made me feel safe. And that
Yes.
they never reversed roles with me. They never kind. I was open to the idea, but the way they essentially they just wanted to fuck other people, and that was
Yes.
sort of the phrase that they would use. They'd be like, "I just want to fuck other people." I'd be like,
Yes.
"Okay,
Wow.
great. That's not making me feel safe."
Yeah,
I would like
totally,
to do that too,
yeah,
but
yeah.
I'm worried about your motivations here. So,
I
um,
totally agree.
yeah,
Sorry, I have to
yeah.
just like
Jump
I
in,
have to
jump
just
in. Yeah.
say it's so true with like the different partners I've had since being in a polyamorous relationship as well. And even in monogamy, even in
Mm,
monogamous ones, there are just certain people or certain boyfriends I had that I was just like, yeah, I trust you.
mm,
There's no like feeling in my gut like, ooh, maybe I should check up on them, or ooh, maybe I
mm.
should look at their phone when they're in the shower. But then
Yeah.
certain people you're just like, I feel like it's an intuitive thing. You're just like, I don't trust you. And I feel
Mm,
like that's super duper duper important what you're touching on now as well, is like when it comes to polyamory, there might be people who are interested in it, and it's like, if you're interested in it and you're listening to this podcast and you're listening this far in, ask yourself, why are you interested in it? And then
yeah.
why haven't you given it a go yourself? And it
Yeah.
might actually be because the person you're in a relationship with now doesn't give you that sense of security or trust
Mm,
that you need in order to be in a polyamorous
mm.
relationship.
Yeah, totally. I mean, there's two things that I wouldn't,
Yeah.
if you want to learn more about polyamory, I would totally recommend you read The Ethical Slut, which is often guided as like the Bible of polyamory. There's
Okay.
also a couple other things that I'd encourage people to do if you want to, if communication is the bedrock of any relationship. There's two
Yeah.
things that I would encourage you to look at into. One is this idea of dispassionate communication. So, not allowing your communication to be driven by emotion. It's a practice, so you can
Right.
sit with your feelings, listen to your feelings, sit often in long periods of silence with your partner, and communicate once you've had a moment to make sense of those feelings. Because if you're just going, I want to fuck other people, then
Yeah.
it's very, it's very, you're provoking an emotional response in someone else, but then you're also feeling a strong emotion, and then they have to deal with their own emotions, but then also take care of your emotions. So often you can get into an argument because the emotions are overriding what you're trying to communicate. So dispassionate communication is one, and then the other one is this practice called appreciative inquiry. So if we were to open our relationship, how would that make you feel? What does your ideal relationship look like?
Yeah.
You're asking questions. I mean, it's pretty much just asking questions, to be honest. But
Yeah.
appreciative inquiry again is it's a communication style. It's a practice where if two people are practicing appreciative inquiry, where there's no sort of right or wrong answer, you're not being offended. You're just kind of unpacking something together through a lot of questions,
Yeah.
especially for guys who, in particular, because of the masculine ideal, we struggle to engage with and communicate around our emotions. I think learning about these systems is a great way to find a way to unpack this. So yeah, this is shout out to all the dudes out there. if you find communicating about these things really hard, see if you can find a method that you can use to help you get to a place where you can communicate well.
Yeah, communication, so important. So important. Is there anything else that we haven't discussed that you want to share before we wrap up?
That's a great question. I mean, I would just encourage people to read about it. Again, Ethical Slut's a fantastic book. That's really written in a style, both giving examples from the writers' lives, but also breaking down the various aspects of polyamory and making it really accessible if you're curious about it, whether you are looking to become polyamorous, or you are polyamorous and you just want to have a deeper understanding of, say, the language or the history of it. I would totally recommend that book.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I think that's a wrap.
My pleasure. Yeah, great. Hey, lovely talking to you today. This has been really fun.
Yeah, thank you so much. Have a great day.
Cheers. Same to you.
Bye.